Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to watch my ESH 520 Sustainable Energy Final Project. Throughout this presentation, I will be discussing energy injustices in Palestine and the way securing renewable energy projects in Gaza may help transition and restore energy justice. The United Nations Relief and Work Agency for Palestine defines Palestinian refugees as persons whose normal place of residence was Palestine during the year and period of 1946 to May 1948, who lost both homes and means of livelihood as a result of the 1948 conflict. When the agency began operations in 1950, it was responding to the needs of 750 Palestinian refugees, while today that number is 5.9. Throughout this presentation, we will discuss the connection between this course's audit and my MESH project, justice implications of both, the distributive recognition, procedural and/or restorative energy justice implications of my project idea for Gaza. We'll address the ways that remediation can acknowledge the injustices in Palestine, and we'll finally end with some reflections I've had. My MESH project focuses on creating sustainable solutions that may address the social, environmental, and geopolitical injustices occurring in Palestine. To do so, I'm applying knowledge learned in our courses and then turning that into data that may be used to support civic engagement and capacity building projects occurring both locally in Palestine and multilaterally with other nations. Increased civic engagement is a key strategy for yielding a developed nation with better private and public sector, cross national partnerships for job creation, environmental health, public health, food and water security, as well as energy autonomy. So, throughout this course, I was focused on auditing the healthcare and residential spaces in Gaza, Palestine, as a means of understanding how energy impacts various facets of the Palestinian society. While the West Bank has more land to develop renewable energy services, Gaza is limited in physical space and plagued with rolling blackouts. Therefore, efficiency and resiliency are both important factors when developing projects within Gaza's renewable energy sector. Let's take a moment to discuss the main justice implications towards my mesh project. So, throughout this program, I've spent time educating myself on the intricacies of Palestinian struggles. But to be honest, I've often felt stuck as to how sustainable solutions could be created when roadblocks were a result of Israeli occupation, deteriorating leadership within the Palestinian Authority, limited financial resources, and an international community whose investment and political advocacy were often stunted by the UN Security Council's vetoing committee known as P5. A lot of responsibility appeared to fall on the residents of Palestine themselves, and while their communities are indeed steadfast and unwavering in their ability to survive, it is extremely sad and heartbreaking to see what has happened to these people for 70 plus years. So I've been looking for that aha moment that would help spark the the solution creating process that our mesh project is geared towards. Having gone through this course, I believe that energy could be the common denominator that can propel Palestinian sustainable development. As it stands, the ITA's evaluation of energy in Gaza notes daily electricity cuts affect water, sanitation, education, agriculture, telecommunications, as well as healthcare services. Therefore, we could argue that the main justice implication of my MESH project is providing support to to the development of the Palestinian renewable energy sector so that other elements of society noted above by the ITA can be equally restored and improved. Now we take a moment to discuss the main distributive observations I've made in this scenario. So, my critical friend teammates and I agree the distribution injustice is a main factor impacting energy autonomy in Gaza. From its weak Gaza power plant to damaged electricity lines from Egypt and energy dependency from Israel, energy security and its distribution in Gaza has instead been replaced with energy blackouts. The shift towards renewable energy installations being built within the food service sector and the healthcare sector are very promising, as these energy sources would be created, managed, and used by Palestinians directly. Distributionally, one could argue that being able to create systems where dependency is not on the party that is illegally occupying your territory is a step towards both energy security and energy justice. As our team interviewed each other for this assignment, we had really interesting conversations about recognition. I wanted to share some of the feedback notes I received from the both of them as they align well with my perspective on recognition justice as a whole, and then, of course, how it relates to both my audit and my mesh project. They noted recognition throughout your course study was very evident in the sense that it provided many different perspectives, intended and unintended consequences, and acknowledged the complex systems surrounding the energy sector and geopolitical conflict. We discussed the difficulty in providing adequate solutions to the issues at hand due to governmental restrictions, lack of accountability, and violence towards the Palestinian people, which is deeply embedded in governance. However, despite the injustice, the Palestinian people have shown brave resilience and fight against the odds. It is important to acknowledge the perseverance of the Palestinian population in Israel, and in the same sense of recognizing societal injustice, you also recognize their strength. I also want to highlight that you aim to provide solutions that only uplifted the Palestinian people and never presented ill consequences or negative unintended consequences to the Israeli government. Your implementations and solutions throughout your scenario did not insinuate that bad intentions or outcomes should happen for the Israeli people, but instead aim to uplift equity, justice, and independence for Palestinians so that they can have equal access to essential resources. Another teammate noted, in some ways, the Israeli Palestinian conflict serves as an example of acceptable colonization, meaning if Israel can get away with these atrocities, then what is stopping other colonial nations from doing the same? The notes ended with this point, which I find really interesting. Truthfully, if there was more recognition on how geopolitical conflict, i.e., violence, bombing, and displacement, prevents Israel from developing renewable energy and reaching net zero goals, then those in the energy sector would see the importance of Palestinian inclusion and independence. With Palestinians' territories heavily relying on exports for energy, specifically diesel fuel, how can Israel reach net zero? What innovations can come about in the energy sector when a percentage of the population is segregated and limited in energy access? Just a lot of really interesting things to consider. Procedural justice really asks us to consider how can we create fair and equal procedures where people, regardless of their socioeconomic, financial, residential status, can be involved in the decision making process. And a lot of times we see those that are the rights holders, not only stake and shareholders, are forgotten in this process. So, a big part of procedural justice is equity building. And within Gaza, and through my audit assignment, I learned that there's just a need for more auditors of energy in the West Bank and Gaza. It's a very limited position, and with that limitation comes limited information to make effective projects and changes. Equity building and procedural justice would also consider within Gaza the needs of the youth, the elderly, and the refugees, which is discussed later on in this presentation. And then the role of those who are outside of rights holders via international support is that support in research and advocacy. Within the territory itself, a way to improve procedural justice is to see what type of projects and organizations that are run by Palestinians themselves are already happening and make sure to support them, their mission statements, and their goals. A good example of this is Sunbox Solar Energy. Sunbox Solar Energy is a really great example because they provide renewable energy to residential homes. The CEO, Majd Mashauri, is Palestinian themselves, and they express difficulty in providing residents um, with difficulty in providing energy needs. So they developed this solar infrastructure that was able to provide energy to the people of Gaza despite military blockades and governmental restrictions. It doesn't mean that these military restrictions and governmental blockades have disappeared. sandbox still has to deal with them on the daily. But regardless, the residents of Gaza and West Bank seeing effective and thoughtful projects being put forward also uplifts them and opens themselves from wanting to try to get involved with projects such as this, which increases community building, it increases trust, it increases advocacy on their own end, and it also just stirs international support to step in and make sure projects such as this are supported and protected. When considering restorative justice, I believe research, design, finalization of steps, and delivery of project are a helpful way to organize thoughts, make sure decision making is inclusive, and the ideas and needs of as many people within the community as possible are heard. And of course, you can return to steps 1 through 3 as many times as needed before you get to that final delivery stage. And even after the delivery stage, um, in life and within this project, I believe I will need to go back to steps 1 through 3 many times. Um, Within my audit, the various assignments, and this mesh project as a whole, I really find myself within the research and design state right now, just conducting research, presenting it to different Palestinian organizations, getting their feedback from them, getting feedback from professors, my fellow classmates, and at the end be able to help deliver some type of restorative justice project, presentation, data that can help different people, organizations in Palestine really address their social, environmental, and geopolitical injustices and needs. And after this course, with really in consideration of how these injustices can be potentially addressed through building sustainable energy services. Over the next few slides, I break down some project ideas I've had that I've thought about within, step 2, the design stage. So if you get through my presentation, I would really love to hear your ideas. Thanks. In the next portion of this presentation, we'll focus on how we can address justice and take steps to remediate injustices. We ask ourselves who should address these injustices. Myself and my critical friend group mates all agree that Palestinian people play a vital role in shaping their own nation's future. This belief supports just transitions, as Indigenous rights holders, such as Palestinians, are too often not recognized when establishing distributive and procedural development. While I believe Palestinian communities should be the first and priority leaders in addressing energy injustices, one group mate listed the Israeli government as a first key figure. And here is where our opinions deviate a little bit. While I do agree that Israeli government support would make a huge impact, I also do not believe that we can rely, unfortunately, on um, one that is our oppressor to give us solutions for the parameters of our own autonomy. So, part of establishing recognition justice is simply being honest. So, while I am hopeful that one day the Israeli government will end their systematic violence against Palestinians, because of course peace and prosperity are a bedrock of sustainability, I do not see sustainable solutions coming from them in the near future without pressure, at least from the international community. That being said, I do believe partnerships between Israeli nonprofits focused on decolonizing Palestine and Palestinian organizations, along with international nonprofits, are a key step forward in this equation. International governments and multilateral projects investing their time and resources, along with making financial investments in Gaza and the West Bank, will more or less force the Israeli government to take a step back from their colonizing tactics, at least should they want to keep positive relationships with their fellow nations. In Module 6, I explored the 8 refugee camps in Gaza and considered how energy policy and governance may introduce energy security. I am sure that we can all agree that no one deserves to live in a refugee camp in perpetuity, let alone as a refugee in one's own country. So, while the long term goal is sustainable and healthy cities for Palestinians to live in as part of SDG goals as well as human rights, creating stable energy access will allow the people to focus efforts on development, on other parts of development at least, knowing that their basic needs are being met. In the following slides, I present three project proposals to improve energy services in Gaza's refugee camps. The 8 refugee camps in Gaza are listed on the slide for you, as well as the renewable energy projects that I envision being assigned to each of the camps. If you would like a better visual explanation of where the camps are in terms of any natural resources that they're beside, such as body of water, um, their location in terms of if they're in North Gaza, South, or in the middle area, or how close and far they are from one another in terms of density of population. My Own Prakash post has a visual guide as well as notes at the bottom of the post explaining a little bit of information and backstory on each of the camps. Over the next few slides, I will be discussing project proposals that I've envisioned for the territory of Gaza. I would like to point out that these are, of course, in their very preliminary steps, but because so much of my mesh project is focused on doing research and helping organizations potentially build up their capacity building, I always think that it's part of a interesting way to imagine experiments and projects. So as I do research, they can translate to possible real life scenarios and hopefully down the line turn into something that could be real. So, first, we look at a potential small wind turbine farm that would be used for the refugee camps of Al Maghazi, Al Nusrat, and Al Burej. These three camps are somewhat beside each other, so the wind turbine farm being within a circular shape would be the most spatially effective. As land will have to be allocated to set this up, and Gaza is already very densely populated, making best use of this land would be, of course, ideal. Therefore, in addition to creating a renewable energy farm, a local food farm would be used on the ground level. It would be powered by the energy itself, managed by the youth in the community, along with adult leadership. This would create incentives for community trust, relationship building, and youth development. The World Food Program notes that 63% of Gaza is food insecure. So this presents an opportunity to lessen dependency on other nations in two ways, both food and energy. Last several months, I have been volunteering with an organization in Palestine that works on creating projects for the youth to improve their capacity building, advocacy, and involvement in their territories, their government, and their own future, of course. So I thought that creating some type of long term energy project that's new outside of solar and wind that's already somewhat been implemented in Gaza and West Bank could be a really exciting opportunity for the youth to get involved in. The two refugee camps known as Al Shati and Deir al Balah are beside the water, so this would present an interesting opportunity to create renewable hydropower focused energy. The RivGen project, as it's titled, the company itself, it's a wave tidal energy company that already has several projects in existence, and they're really focused on creating energy that's off grid and managed and used by the local community, which really aligns with the incentives for this project proposal. The RivGen tidal farms would create an opportunity for local energy policy governance along with international development support. So it brings in that multilateral aspect into the project as well. Um, but the energy would still be managed by the Palestinian people directly. It's more that international support is for protection so that these project sites are not destroyed by the Israeli military. Communities besides the water are even further away from urban settings with power line and grids. Therefore, there's more strain and stress on the existing energy systems, and this creates incentive to address local oceanside refugee needs, especially those that are in areas with colder weather and live beside the water, of course. The solar farms would be the most effective in the camps of Jabalia Khan, Yunus, and Rafah. The solar farms would each exist on their own location and could similarly become a two-in-one workable land. Whereas the wind farm is a food energy site, the solar farm could also welcome farm animals that are free to range and feed on the land. This would initially take up more resources to build the land, but then would offer the opportunity for local camps to also have means to chicken and eggs without having to worry about needing more money to buy nutritional foods. Unfortunately, all three of these camps have been heavily attacked, and this puts, of course, an energy demand on Palestine in various ways. Centralized and impacted spaces result in greater consumption of resources. It also means that when nearby energy sources fail, a greater proportion of the population is left in the dark and is impacted. This creates tension, raises people's instinct to protect and fight back. And while there may be hesitation to set up solar farms here, this is where energy, international policy, and protection really needs to step in. And really, to follow up on the notes from the previous slide in terms of the role of the international community, I wanted to point out Article 7, Item 2 of Paris Agreement that really drives the idea that part of the global challenge of addressing sustainable changes, addressing climate change, is to protect those within developing nations, to protect their people, their environment, their projects, their livelihood, because they are the ones who will naturally face more adverse effects of climate change. And it takes more resources, it takes more time, it takes more effort, honestly, to bring themselves out of the state of consistently being a developing nation. And if we want to look at our goals for the next 10, 20, 30 years, if we leave countries in the same place that they've been in the previous 3, 5, 7 decades, then as a whole global community, we cannot move forward if parts of this planet are always just trying to keep up and maintain themselves as just a developing nation. If you've made it this far into my presentation, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen and supporting me. It always means so much having you all be a part of my project and give me feedback. And especially thank you for listening to my tangent in my previous slide. To just reel it back into the focus of this project, I wanted to end this presentation with some reflections that I've had in the present and the type of things that I'm looking forward to in the future within this course and outside of this program. So, in the present, the research I've conducted within my audit provided insight into the infrastructural development needs, energy power divisions, and geopolitical struggles within the Gaza Strip. It's also been the first time within my studies in this program where I saw solutions for Palestinian development being implemented and positive strides forward being taken, which is very exciting. I am hoping to take the assignments that I've worked on thus far and some of the project ideas submitted via assignments in this class and reach out to various renewable energy organizations working on projects in Gaza and the West Bank, as they will, of course, have a better understanding of workable land options. And when looking to the future, and on a personal and reflective note, I realize when discussing injustices and just transitions, whether it's within energy or another sector, I can often get stuck on the things that are going wrong, and the focus becomes on what is not working. While the recognition step of energy justice is, of course, vitally important, Using that recognition to shift gears into procedural and restorative justice holds power as well. So, I just want to say I'm not sure if you've all felt that in some point throughout our coursework and studies. Um, just wondering why things are so hard. How can we overcome the struggles? How do we kind of shift our minds from a negative mindset to the solution making process mindset? And if you felt that in any way, let's just talk about it more with each other. Let's share our grievances, our concerns, our goals, our ideas, whether they seem like big projects that are unattainable or just something exciting that crossed your mind. Because sometimes just addressing injustices together instead of being stuck in our own thoughts is a really simple but effective way to help each other make progress. And for me, on a personal note, what I'm really looking forward to in the future is as we move into our next course, environmental justice, I'm hoping to improve my skills of communication and research so that if I have the opportunity to collaborate with the renewable energy project in Palestine, I can be the best of service.